Fog drifts over the ruined city of Nanking, December 1937. The air smells of smoke and fear. Streets once alive with merchants and children are now silent except for the distant thud of artillery and the cries of the lost. A young schoolteacher, Jiang Li, moves through the mist, her hands clutching the small fingers of 12 children who follow like frightened sparrows. Their faces are pale, their breaths visible in the cold morning. Around them lie broken bicycles, overturned carts, bodies half covered in dust. The sound of boots and engines grows closer. Jiang Li glances down an alley, her heart pounding. She whispers for the children to stay quiet, pressing them behind a wall as a Japanese tank rolls past, its metal tracks scraping against stone. A soldier shouts in Japanese. Another laughs. She dares not breathe. One of the younger boys trembles, his small hands covering his ears. Jiang Li pulls him close, whispering a prayer, her voice barely audible over the grinding of machines. When a city dies, she thinks, it does not fall in silence. It screams through every burning home, every lost child. Across the river, the Nazi flag flutters beside the Chinese one. John Rabe stands outside the German embassy, his notebook open, recording names of refugees flooding into the international safety zone. His breath clouds in the air. He wipes sweat and soot from his forehead, his expression both tired and resolute. A colleague shouts behind him, "John, they'll ignore the boundaries, they'll come through." Rabe turns, his voice calm but sharp. "Then we'll remind them that even war must bow to humanity." He looks toward the crowd pressing at the gates. Mothers scream for help. Men clutch their wounded. Children cry for their parents. In the chaos, Rabe notices Jiang Li and her small group struggling forward. "Let the children through," he yells. A German guard hesitates, then opens the gate. Jiang Li bows deeply, her eyes filled with gratitude and exhaustion. "Thank you, sir," she whispers. "We have nowhere else." Rabe nods. "You are safe here. This is the international safety zone. No soldiers, no guns, only people." But even as he says it, the dull rumble of artillery echoes again from the distance, shaking the ground beneath them. Both glance toward the city. The fire never stops. Outside the city, young Lieutenant Nakamura walks among rows of Chinese prisoners kneeling beside the river. The winter air is sharp, cutting through his uniform. His commander shouts from behind, "Nakamura, the Emperor's orders no mercy." Nakamura grips his rifle tightly. The sound of gunfire breaks the air as other soldiers fire into the river. He looks down at the captives. Farmers, students, old men. A woman clutching her newborn meets his eyes, her face calm, almost accepting. Nakamura looks away, his stomach twists. "They said we came to bring order," he thinks, "but all I see is smoke and ghosts." He lowers his rifle, turning toward the fog, his breath shaking. Behind him, the shots continue. Night falls. The church inside the safety zone glows faintly from candlelight. Jiang Li sits among the children, wrapping them in blankets scavenged from the dead. She hums softly, an old lullaby drowned by the moans of the city outside. A little boy walks up to her and offers a small white handkerchief. "My mother made this," he says, his voice thin. "She said if I keep it, I'll be safe." Jiang Li forces a smile, tears rising in her eyes. "Then keep it close," she whispers. "It's the last light we have." The candle flickers, the wax dripping slowly down, like the last drops of warmth left in the world. Outside, the church bell tolls. Each ring echoes across the empty streets, through smoke and snow and the faint mist of breath from those still hiding. The city seems to breathe with it, slow, broken, fading. The camera pulls back. The mist thickens, swallowing the church, the bodies, the burning ruins. From above, the city looks like a dying star, its last embers buried in shadow. Jiang Li's voice returns, distant and trembling. In the fog, we no longer knew who was alive and who was already a ghost. The bell rings one final time before the sound fades into silence. The smoke and ash cling to the streets like a suffocating shroud. Dawn breaks weakly, pale light spilling over the battered rooftops, illuminating bodies strewn across alleys and courtyards. Jiang Li moves cautiously, guiding the children through shattered streets toward the church. Their small footsteps echo in the emptiness, punctuated by distant gunfire and the occasional metallic clang of falling debris. Each step feels heavier than the last. Each breath tastes of fear and dust. Her hands are raw from gripping the children's fingers. Her arms ache, but she does not allow herself to stop. Every corner could hide a soldier, every shadow a threat. The city is silent in the way of the dead, and the living move like ghosts among them. She pauses to catch her breath in a narrow alley, the children huddled close around her. One boy clutches a small, torn notebook, scribbled with half-formed characters. Another girl trembles, her face streaked with soot and tears. Jiang Li presses her hands against their shoulders. "We are almost there," she whispers, though even she doubts it. Through the haze, the silhouette of the church rises a fragile sanctuary amid destruction. Smoke curls around its spire, twisting like a warning. In the distance, explosions ripple through the streets, and the unmistakable sound of boots pounding on stone grows closer. She knows the soldiers are searching. Every instinct screams to run faster, hide deeper, survive. Meanwhile, Rabe moves through the compound, directing the volunteers and refugees with urgent precision. He records names, distributes blankets, guides frightened mothers toward the tents. Outside, the sounds of the city's horror drift across the gates, screams, shouting, gunfire. Rabe's hands tremble slightly as he writes, but his eyes are sharp, calculating. He knows that every name he records may be the only record left of a person in a world intent on erasing them. A young volunteer approaches, pale and shaken. They're moving through the northern districts. They're killing indiscriminately. Rabe nods grimly, his jaw tight. Then we must do all we can to expand the zone. Every child, every family, they must find safety here. His gaze drifts over the crowd, resting briefly on Jiang Li and the children moving toward the church. Relief flares in his chest, quickly replaced by dread. The massacre has not stopped, and the mist hides horrors yet unseen. Nakamura walks through the devastated streets, rifle slung loosely over his shoulder. He pauses at a collapsed wall, peering into a courtyard where bodies lie twisted in unnatural positions. His stomach churns. A small girl cries out, clutching her doll. He looks away, swallowing hard. Orders echo in his mind. No mercy. The Emperor's will is absolute. But his conscience claws at him, relentless and unforgiving. He knows he is capable of following them, of killing without question. Yet a strange hesitation roots him in place. He steps forward, then stops again, haunted by the faces he has seen, by the smell of smoke and iron and fear. Somewhere in the distance, a faint bell tolls. It is impossible to tell if it comes from the church or from the ruins themselves, but the sound pierces him, leaving him unsteady. Inside the church, Jiang Li tends to the children, murmuring reassurances she does not feel. She teaches them to keep low, to whisper, to move only when necessary. One boy, his small hands shaking, looks up at her. "Teacher, will they find us?" She swallows, glancing at the faint glow of candlelight that does little to illuminate the shadows. "They may come," she says softly, "but we will not give them our fear. We will hide, and we will survive." The children nod uncertainly, holding tight to each other. Outside, the faint rustle of movement alerts her. A shadow passes across the shattered window. Jiang Li freezes, her heart hammering. She tightens her grip on the hand of the smallest child, willing herself to remain calm. Nakamura approaches the church cautiously, moving through rubble and mist. He pauses at the doorway, rifle raised, and notices the children huddled inside. Their faces are pale, their eyes wide with terror, but they do not move. His finger tightens on the trigger, yet his gaze lingers on a small white handkerchief clutched by one of the children, embroidered with the word for peace. Something in that fragile emblem cuts through the haze of orders and blood. He lowers his weapon slightly, uncertainty rippling through him. Outside, the city continues to burn. The cries and gunfire a constant reminder of what he has been commanded to do and what he no longer wishes to become. In the church, Jiang Li senses his presence. She does not scream, she does not move. She waits, praying that whatever choice he makes will not end the fragile sanctuary of life within these walls. The children hold their breath. The candle flickers, casting dancing shadows across walls scarred by fire and gunfire. Outside, Nakamura stands on the threshold, caught between duty and conscience, the mist curling around his boots like ghostly fingers. Every heartbeat echoes in the silent cathedral, and for a single moment, the world holds its breath. The night stretches on, a fragile bubble of quiet in the midst of chaos. Smoke drifts through broken windows. The children, trembling but alive, cling to each other and to Jiang Li. Outside, the faintest stir of wind carries the distant sounds of destruction and the whispers of the dead. In that stillness, a single truth persists. Even in a city of ghosts, there remains the flicker of human hope, fragile but unyielding, waiting for the dawn. The fire outside rages like a living thing, devouring the streets and alleys of Nanking. Smoke pours through shattered windows, twisting into grey tendrils that reach for the sky. Inside the church, Jiang Li moves among the children, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. She whispers instructions. Stay low. Stay quiet. Do not move unless I tell you. The children huddle together, some clutching makeshift dolls, others burying their faces in each other's coats. The faint glow of candlelight casts their shadows long against the cracked walls, flickering like spectres in the night. Every sound from outside, the distant rumble of artillery, the sporadic gunfire, the faintest scrape of boots on rubble sends a jolt of fear through the group. Jiang Li breathes deeply, telling herself that if she loses her calm, the children will lose theirs, and in this city of ghosts, fear can kill as surely as bullets. Outside, Nakamura hesitates at the threshold of the church. His rifle hangs loosely in his hands, the weight of command pressing on him like a stone. He scans the room, counting 12 small faces peering from the shadows. His orders echo in his mind. Eliminate resistance, leave no witnesses. But the faces of the children, pale and trembling, pierce the armor of obedience he has worn so tightly. One small boy holds out a white handkerchief, embroidered with the character for peace, his eyes wide with innocence and trust. Nakamura lowers his weapon further, a knot of doubt twisting in his gut. Somewhere between duty and conscience, he falters, caught between the world he was told to uphold and the humanity he cannot abandon. He steps forward slowly, boots crunching on broken stone, each movement deliberate, careful not to provoke the soldiers outside. Jiang Li notices the shadow at the doorway. She freezes, her hands gripping the children's shoulders. The room is silent except for the low hum of her own heartbeat and the faint whistle of smoke curling through cracks in the walls. She watches him, her mind racing, aware that the slightest sound could betray their hiding place. The children, sensing the tension, cling closer, holding their breath in unison. The boy with the handkerchief steps forward slightly, offering it again, as if sensing that something must bridge the chasm between them and the figure at the door. Nakamura kneels slightly, his eyes on the small hand extended toward him. A single droplet of sweat traces the line of his temple. Outside, the sounds of destruction continue: shouts, explosions, and the occasional gunshot, but inside, time seems suspended, waiting for the choice that will define this moment. He reaches out, taking the handkerchief with a trembling finger. The simplicity of the gesture, the innocence of the child, strikes him harder than any order or punishment could. He lowers the rifle entirely, feeling the weight of his actions press against his chest. He glances back toward the misty streets and the soldiers moving through them like shadows, and for the first time he sees the faces of his own conscience reflected in the smoke and ruin. The children watch silently, their breaths held, as if understanding that this moment is both perilous and sacred. Jiang Li exhales slowly, a tiny sigh that carries relief, but she does not move, does not speak. She cannot risk breaking the fragile spell that has held this sliver of life intact. The night drags on. Outside, the city burns and screams, indifferent to the sanctuary within these walls. The children finally relax, leaning against each other, exhaustion overtaking fear for the first time in hours. Jiang Li kneels beside them, murmuring prayers, her voice barely above a whisper. Nakamura steps back, disappearing into the mist, leaving the church untouched. The candle flickers once more, casting dancing shadows over the soot-stained walls. Each flicker is a heartbeat, each heartbeat a reminder that even amid horror, compassion can carve out a small refuge. Through the windows, the streets of Nanking continue to smoke and burn, the cries of the wounded and dying blending into the night. Yet inside, life persists, fragile, fleeting, but undeniable. Jiang Li gathers the children closer, the white handkerchief folded carefully in her hand. Somewhere deep within, a quiet determination settles over her. They have survived this night, and as long as even one breath remains, they will keep living, keep protecting, keep resisting the shadows of death that surround them. The city may be a graveyard, the streets a tomb, but inside this ruined church, in the hush of candlelight, hope clings stubbornly, unyielding against the darkness. Smoke curls through the broken roof, drifting over the sleeping children, over Jiang Li, over the faint outline of Nakamura's retreating figure. Outside, Nanking is a city of ghosts, but inside, in this small room, life endures. The echoes of the night, the cries of the fallen, the footsteps of the living, they all intermingle in the mist. And in the silence between them, a single truth is clear. Even in the heart of horror, the human spirit can hold fast, defiant, unbroken, and luminous against the darkness. The sun rises weakly over Nanking, a pale grey light filtering through the lingering smoke. The streets are littered with the remnants of a city torn apart, burned carts, shattered signs, and the bodies of those too slow or too unlucky to escape. The air is thick with ash and the acrid smell of charred wood. Jiang Li steps cautiously out of the church, her eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The children cling to her skirts, their small hands trembling. Every shadow seems alive, every alley a potential threat. She counts the children again and again, her heart hammering in her chest. One wrong step, one misplaced sound, and the fragile sanctuary they had found could be destroyed in an instant. Rabe moves quickly through the compound, coordinating the volunteers. The international safety zone is overflowing with refugees. Mothers clutch babies to their chests. Men with bloodied clothes try to comfort their families. Rabe's face is drawn, his hands raw from directing the influx of terrified civilians. Outside the gates, the muffled sounds of gunfire and shouting remind everyone that the world beyond the walls is a nightmare that refuses to pause. He stops at a makeshift infirmary, checking the wounded and helping to calm those who have lost their minds to fear. "We must stretch the boundaries," he tells a volunteer. "Every family that reaches us, every child, matters. Do not let them fall into the streets." His voice is calm but carries the weight of urgency, a steady hand against chaos. Jiang Li leads the children along the outer edge of the compound, keeping to shadows, avoiding areas where soldiers might pass. She notices smoke curling from an alley nearby and freezes, her eyes catching the glint of a helmet in the mist. A Japanese soldier moves through the ruins, methodical, searching. Her stomach twists, and she presses the children behind a collapsed wall. Their breaths are shallow, their eyes wide with terror. The soldier stops, scanning the area. For a tense moment, he tilts his head, and Jiang Li's heart stops. Then he moves on, unaware of their presence. Jiang Li exhales quietly, willing herself to remain calm for the children's sake. Nakamura walks along the northern streets, the smoke stinging his eyes, the sounds of gunfire and screams echoing around him. He is tired, his uniform soiled, his hands gripping the rifle with a mixture of discipline and dread. Orders push him forward, there can be no mercy, but every street, every alley he passes, seems to etch itself into his memory. Mothers clutching children, Men kneeling with hands raised, the elderly dragging themselves through the rubble, all are images that will not leave him. Somewhere deep inside, a conflict churns. He has followed orders, yet each action erodes a part of him he cannot reconcile. Back in the church, Jiang Li tends to the children, distributing water and small scraps of bread. They huddle close together, whispering to one another to remain quiet. The candle flickers in the draught from broken windows, casting long, trembling shadows across the cracked walls. A boy tugs at her sleeve, his eyes wide. "Teacher, they will find us again, won't they?" She hesitates, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Perhaps," she whispers, "but we will not let them take what we still have. We will hide, and we will survive." The children nod uncertainly, their small bodies pressed against one another, holding tightly to the fragile promise of safety that Jiang Li offers. Outside, the faint sound of a bell tolls in the distance, perhaps from the church, perhaps from some other forgotten corner of the city. Its sound cuts through the din of destruction, a fragile thread of human order amid chaos. Rabe pauses at the gate, listening, then continues his work, moving from group to group, offering reassurance, distributing food, recording names. Every action is a small defiance against the overwhelming tide of violence that surrounds them. Nakamura pauses on a street corner, observing the smoke curling over the city, the shadowed figures moving among the ruins. He lowers his rifle, his conscience gnawing at him. Somewhere in the distance, a child cries, and the sound slices through him. He knows he is expected to enforce terror, but the echoes of humanity, the faces of women, children, the sick, and the elderly hold him in place. He continues on, conflicted, haunted, unsure how to reconcile duty with conscience. The day drags on, heavy with smoke and heat and fear. The streets remain littered with ruins and echoes of the dead. Inside the church, Jiang Li and the children press together, weary but alive. Each breath they take is a small victory. Each step they take outside is a measured gamble. Outside, Rabe works tirelessly, a shield of human decency in a city being devoured by madness. Nakamura moves through the mist and ruin, a man caught between the world he was taught to obey and the spark of conscience that refuses to die. Amid the chaos, there is a fragile truth. Survival requires vigilance, courage, and humanity, even when the world insists on cruelty. In Nanking, in the shadow of massacre, the small sanctuary of the church becomes a beacon, dim but steadfast, for those who refuse to surrender to the darkness. Smoke and dust hang thick over Nanking, turning the day into a grey blur. The streets outside the church are littered with rubble and corpses, the occasional flicker of fire marking the spot where another building has succumbed to flames. Inside, Jiang Li tends to the children. Her hands raw from constant movement, her voice hoarse from whispers and prayers. Every small sound from outside footsteps, the distant crack of gunfire, the whine of engines pulls her gaze toward the windows. The children cling to her, trembling, some murmuring prayers of their own, others staring silently into the shadows. Every face is pale, etched with exhaustion, fear, and disbelief. Rabe moves through the compound with urgency, checking on families, distributing water, blankets, and food. His face is drawn, eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. He pauses to comfort a mother holding a dying child, speaking softly. "Stay with me. You are not alone. We will not let them take you." Outside the walls, smoke curls from the city streets, carrying with it screams and the intermittent thud of artillery. Rabe's gaze drifts to the northern sector, where Japanese soldiers are reported moving through the ruins. He clenches his fists, knowing that each moment he hesitates could mean a life lost. Jiang Li peeks through a crack in the wall, spotting movement near the outer gates. Soldiers patrol, scanning the area. She pulls the children closer, whispering instructions. "Stay low, keep silent, do not draw attention." The tension is unbearable, each heartbeat amplified by fear. One small boy's hand shakes as he grips hers, and she squeezes gently, trying to infuse courage where she herself has none. Outside, the distant sounds of gunfire seem to edge closer, echoing through alleys and empty streets like the city itself is alive with despair. Nakamura moves carefully through the northern streets, eyes scanning the shadows. His steps are deliberate, but hesitation weighs on him. Each body, each crying child, each pleading mother he passes etches itself deeper into his conscience. Orders echo in his mind: eliminate resistance, leave no witnesses. Yet every image of human suffering gnaws at him. He pauses by a burned building, listening to the faint cries of a child somewhere beyond the mist. Something within him falters. He lowers his rifle, his finger loosening on the trigger, his mind racing. The line between duty and morality has blurred beyond recognition. Inside the church, a sudden knock at the door startles Jiang Li and the children. She freezes, her heart lurching. "Stay behind me," she whispers, her voice trembling but firm. The knock comes again, cautious, hesitant. A shadow moves across the doorway. Nakamura steps inside, hands empty, his uniform smeared with soot and grime. The children hold their breath, frozen in fear, but he does not raise his rifle. Instead, he meets Jiang Li's gaze, conflicted, the weight of the world written across his face. He notices the children clutching each other, the white handkerchief folded carefully in one small hand. His jaw tightens, and for a long moment, silence dominates the room. Jiang Li gathers herself and speaks softly. You don't have to do this here. We are just children. We are just hiding." Nakamura shifts uncomfortably, glancing at the candlelight that flickers across frightened faces. The sounds of destruction outside are a constant reminder of the horrors waiting beyond the walls. For the first time, he questions everything he has been told: the orders, the commands, the unquestioned obedience. The human faces before him are not enemies. They are fragile, alive, and terrified. Slowly, he lowers his shoulders, stepping fully into the room without aggression, as if each step is a silent defiance of what he has been commanded to be. Rabe enters the courtyard, aware of the commotion in the church. He pauses, sensing tension but also seeing the delicate balance of humanity preserved in the small room. Families huddle closer, and volunteers move quietly to avoid disturbing the fragile calm. Outside, the city continues to burn, screams rising and fading in the distance. Within these walls, life persists, fragile yet unbroken. Every action, every small choice, becomes an act of resistance against the tide of violence that threatens to consume them. The mist thickens, curling through broken windows, over the sleeping children, over Jiang Li and Nakamura's uneasy presence. For a fleeting moment, all the terror of the city, all the chaos of destruction, fades into the background. The room holds a single truth. In the heart of horror, humanity can persist. Even when the streets are rivers of blood, even when the city screams in despair, there exists a fragile sanctuary built from courage, conscience, and the will to survive. The children breathe slowly, the tension easing but not disappearing, as the shadows outside the church stretch and twist, waiting for the dawn. The night has fallen over Nanking, dense with smoke and the acrid stench of burning buildings. Outside the walls of the safety zone, the city is alive with destruction. Gunfire punctuates the distant wails of the dying, and shadows of soldiers flit among the ruins. Inside the church, Jiang Li huddles with the children, their bodies pressed close together, shivering from cold and fear. Candlelight flickers against the cracked walls, illuminating pale, anxious faces. Every small noise, a footstep on debris, a distant shout, the faint scrape of metal sends a wave of tension through the room. The children cling to her skirts, their hands trembling, seeking warmth, protection, and reassurance from the one adult who has so far guided them through the nightmare. Jiang Li's heart pounds. She counts each child silently, making sure none has wandered. The fragile serenity is broken by a low, cautious knock at the church door. She freezes, her pulse racing. "Stay behind me," she whispers, her voice trembling. The children obey without question, burying their faces in each other. The knock comes again, hesitant. A shadow passes across the doorway, and for a moment, all is silent except for the faint crackle of the candle. Slowly, Lieutenant Nakamura steps inside, his uniform smudged with soot, his rifle lowered, his eyes haunted. He looks at the children, the handkerchief clutched in one small hand, the flicker of fear and hope in their wide eyes. Time stretches. The city outside continues its symphony of horror, but inside the church, silence reigns. Jiang Li gathers courage. "You don't have to do this here," she says softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We are just children. We are hiding. We are not your enemies." Nakamura's jaw tightens. His gaze sweeps over the room, the trembling children, the exhausted teacher, the faint glow of the candle, and he feels the crushing weight of the orders that brought him here. I am following commands," he admits, his voice low, conflicted. Yet even as he speaks, his finger tightens and loosens on the trigger of a duty he no longer feels. The humanity before him, fragile, innocent, alive, clashes violently with the obedience instilled in him. Jiang Li swallows, a lump forming in her throat. She steps slightly forward, placing herself between him and the children. "There is a choice," she whispers. "Even in this darkness, even when the streets are rivers of blood, you can still decide what kind of man you want to be." Nakamura's eyes flicker to the small handkerchief, the simple emblem of peace. A single breath escapes him, long and tense. Outside, the muffled sounds of chaos drift through the broken windows, a reminder of the nightmare waiting beyond the walls. He closes his eyes briefly, shaking, and lowers his rifle fully. The children release their collective breath, trembling but alive. The tension in the room eases slightly, though it is a fragile, temporary relief. Jiang Li gathers the children close, murmuring soothing words, her voice barely rising above a whisper. The candle flickers one final time, casting dancing shadows across the walls, scarred by fire and bullets. Nakamura steps back toward the door, silent, conflicted, yet not hostile. For a moment he looks at the children, a faint glimmer of conscience reflected in his eyes. He disappears into the mist outside, leaving the fragile sanctuary intact. Rabe, moving through the compound, senses the shift in the air. Volunteers and refugees pause, their movements tentative, uncertain if the calm within the church will last. He glances toward the church windows and notes the faint glow of candlelight against the smoke-filled night. A small, fragile beacon amid the relentless tide of death and destruction. The city beyond the walls continues to scream, but inside, life persists. Every breath, every heartbeat, every whispered prayer is a quiet act of defiance against the chaos that threatens to consume them. Through the broken windows, smoke curls over the sleeping children, over Jiang Li, over the shadow of Nakamura's retreating figure. Outside, Nanking remains a city of ghosts, consumed by fire and blood. Inside, the church holds a fragile truth. Even amid horror, the human spirit can endure. Compassion, courage, and conscience carve out a sanctuary in a world gone mad. And for now, in this dim candlelight, among trembling children and the teacher who refuses to abandon them, life clings stubbornly, unbroken, luminous against the darkness. Smoke hangs thick over Nanking, a heavy grey veil that blurs the ruins into one endless landscape of fire and ash. The morning is cold, the wind carrying the acrid scent of burned wood, charred flesh and dust. Streets that once thrummed with life are silent, save for the occasional distant scream or the echo of artillery. Jiang Li moves cautiously along the outer edge of the international safety zone. Her 12 students close at her heels. Each step crunches against rubble, debris, and broken glass. Their eyes dart nervously to every shadow, every corner, every flicker of movement. She counts them constantly, silently praying they all make it to the relative safety of the church. Fear grips her like a vice, but she steels herself. There is no room for panic, not here, not now. Rabe moves swiftly through the compound, coordinating volunteers and directing refugees. The influx of terrified families is relentless, and his nerves are frayed from exhaustion. He kneels beside a woman holding a fevered child, pressing a hand to her shoulder. "We will keep you safe," he whispers. Outside the walls, the distant sounds of destruction gnaw at the calm of the sanctuary. Explosions ripple through abandoned streets, punctuated by gunfire and human cries. Every second, Rabe knows, is a chance for more lives to be lost if the safety zone cannot hold. He glances toward the northern gates where soldiers are reported advancing, his expression tightening. He must act quickly to protect every child, every family, before the tide of death reaches their fragile haven. Jiang Li leads the children through a narrow alley, the walls scorched and blackened. They pause when a sudden clatter echoes nearby. A young boy grips her sleeve tightly, whispering, "Teacher, are they coming for us?" She presses her hand over his mouth, whispering, "We keep moving, quietly, carefully. We are ghosts. They will not see us." Smoke curls from the distance, twisting like fingers through the ruins. Every movement outside the walls is a reminder of the relentless massacre sweeping through the city. Jiang Li forces herself to remain calm, her heart hammering, knowing that if she falters, the children may not survive the moment. Lieutenant Nakamura moves through the northern district, the weight of his conscience heavier with every step. His uniform is smeared with soot and blood. His rifle hangs loosely at his side. Orders echo relentlessly in his mind. Eliminate all resistance, spare no one. Yet each face he passes, the kneeling mother, the terrified child, the old man clinging to life, challenges him. He stops at the edge of a burned courtyard, listening to the faint cries of a child hidden somewhere in the mist. His fingers tighten and loosen on the rifle as he struggles with obedience versus morality. Somewhere in the chaos, a quiet voice insists on the possibility of choice, and for the first time, he feels the fragile stirrings of rebellion within himself. Inside the church, Jiang Li tends to the children, distributing small scraps of food and water. Their trembling bodies cling together, seeking warmth and comfort. She whispers reassurances, though her own voice trembles. One boy pulls out the small white handkerchief embroidered with peace and clutches it to his chest. Jiang Li looks at it and allows herself a small, private sigh of relief. The candle flickers, shadows dancing across the walls scarred by bullets and fire. Outside, faint sounds of gunfire creep closer to the gates of the compound, a reminder that the nightmare of Nanking is relentless and unyielding. Rabe moves to the northern gate, coordinating volunteers and guiding families toward the church. He observes the smoke curling from distant streets, the silhouettes of soldiers patrolling the ruins. Every action is a delicate defiance, a choice to preserve life amidst death. He glances toward Jiang Li and her students approaching the church, their small forms nearly swallowed by the grey morning light and the mist. Relief washes over him briefly, tempered by the knowledge that the massacre shows no mercy and could reach even this fragile sanctuary at any moment. The streets outside continue to burn and echo with screams, but within the church walls, the small group presses on. Each breath, each careful step, is an act of survival. Every heartbeat is a quiet protest against the violence that surrounds them. Jiang Li leads the children through the final stretch toward the sanctuary, their feet skimming rubble and cracked stone. The candle inside flickers as if acknowledging their arrival, casting long, trembling shadows across the walls. For a moment, the world outside fades, leaving only life, fragile but persistent, clinging stubbornly in the midst of horror. The smoke outside thickens, mingling with the morning mist, turning Nanking into a grey, suffocating blur. The distant echoes of artillery and gunfire grow sharper, closer, as Japanese soldiers sweep through the northern streets. The air is heavy with the stench of smoke, blood, and fear. Inside the church, Jiang Li moves among the children, her hands raw from holding, guiding, and comforting them. Their small bodies huddle together, trembling, whispering to each other in hushed voices. Every faint sound, the scrape of boots, the crash of debris, the occasional gunshot pulls their attention, hearts pounding. They are alive, but they feel the city breathing down on them, the chaos pressing against the fragile walls of their sanctuary. Rabe moves swiftly through the compound, coordinating volunteers and reinforcing the perimeter. He checks on families, distributes blankets, and reassures the terrified, all while listening to the constant murmur of violence from beyond the walls. His eyes flick toward the northern gates repeatedly, aware that soldiers are approaching. A mother collapses with exhaustion beside him, clutching her child. He presses a hand to her shoulder, whispering, "You are safe here. We will not let them harm you." Each word is heavy with the weight of possibility. The safety they cling to is tenuous, a fragile thread in a city unraveling. Jiang Li peers through the broken window, her breath shallow, as shadows move in the streets beyond. Soldiers patrol, methodical, their helmets gleaming faintly in the dim light. The children press close, their whispers barely audible, asking if the soldiers will find them. She forces herself to remain calm, her fingers tightening on the smallest hand in her care. Every instinct screams to flee or hide, but the church offers their only chance. Outside, smoke curls around the ruins like fingers reaching for the living, and the faint smell of fire and blood fills every corner of the street. Nakamura moves silently through the northern ruins, boots crunching on shattered stone and glass. His uniform is soiled, his rifle slung loosely at his side. Orders pound in his mind: eliminate all resistance, leave no witnesses. Yet the faces he has seen, the terrified mothers, children clutching makeshift dolls, the elderly dragging themselves through rubble, gnaw at him relentlessly. He pauses at the edge of a burned courtyard, listening to faint cries. His conscience battles duty. Every step he takes is heavy, deliberate, as if each could tip the balance between obedience and mercy. The smoke, the fire, the ghosts of Nanking press in on him, reminding him that choices have consequences beyond orders. Inside the church, Jiang Li and the children wait, tense and silent. A boy clutches the white handkerchief to his chest, its simple promise of peace, a fragile talisman against the horrors outside. The candlelight flickers, casting long, trembling shadows across walls scarred by bullets and fire. Then, a faint scrape at the door, the sound of cautious footsteps. The children freeze. Jiang Li's heart hammers. She grips the shoulders of the nearest child, whispering, "Stay calm, be quiet, trust." Nakamura steps inside, hands empty, uniform smudged with soot and grime. His rifle remains lowered. The children stare, wide-eyed. Jiang Li breathes slowly, trying to steady herself as he surveys the room, conflicted, haunted by what he has been commanded to do and what he cannot bring himself to carry out here. The tension is unbearable. The city beyond continues its symphony of destruction. Cries, shouts, gunfire, explosions. Inside, a fragile bubble of silence holds. Jiang Li takes a step forward. "You have a choice," she whispers. "Even here, in the heart of terror, you can decide what kind of person you wish to be." Nakamura glances at the children, the handkerchief, the candlelight flickering over innocent faces. His fingers tremble as he lowers the rifle entirely. Outside, the sounds of approaching soldiers remind everyone that danger remains. Yet inside, a small sanctuary has been carved from the chaos. Rabe enters the courtyard, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Volunteers pause in their tasks, sensing the fragile calm. Families huddle closer, the children clutching each other, the terror pressing at the edges of their consciousness. Outside, Nanking burns and screams, yet inside the church, life persists. Every breath, every heartbeat, every whispered word is an act of quiet defiance against the world's cruelty. Smoke drifts through the broken windows, curling over sleeping children, over Jiang Li, over Nakamura's hesitant figure. Amid the destruction, a small truth endures. Humanity can survive even in the shadow of annihilation. The city of Nanking lies shrouded in smoke and fire, streets twisted with debris, buildings reduced to blackened skeletons. Outside the walls of the safety zone, Japanese soldiers sweep through the city, their boots echoing over broken stone, their rifles ready. The air is thick with the cries of the dying, mingling with the acrid scent of charred wood and blood. Inside the church, Jiang Li gathers the children close, their small bodies trembling against her, eyes wide and fearful. Candlelight flickers across their pale faces, casting long, quivering shadows against walls scarred by bullets and fire. Every sound from the streets, a shout, a gunshot, a scream pulls at her heart. But she forces herself to remain calm, a steady presence for the children who cling to her for life and hope. The children press together, shivering, whispering to one another in hushed tones. One small boy holds the white handkerchief, embroidered with the word peace, clutching it as if it could shield them from the horrors outside. Jiang Li whispers to them softly, guiding them through breathing exercises to quiet their fear, to make themselves small, almost invisible. Every movement is calculated, deliberate. One wrong step, one sudden noise, and the fragile sanctuary they have found could be shattered in an instant. The candle flickers, the shadows dance, and the city beyond continues its symphony of violence, relentless and unforgiving. Outside, Lieutenant Nakamura moves through the smoke and ruin, each step heavy with conflict. His uniform is smeared with soot, his rifle lowered, fingers trembling. The orders he has followed, orders to kill, to eliminate resistance, to leave no witnesses weigh on him like a physical burden. He pauses at the edge of the church courtyard, listening. The faintest cry of a child reaches him, and something within breaks. Slowly, deliberately, he steps inside the church, hands empty. The children freeze, wide-eyed, but he does not raise his weapon. His eyes sweep over their terrified faces, and he lowers himself slightly, a gesture of humility, remorse, and conscience. The weight of command presses on him, yet he chooses compassion, defying the expectations of the army and the logic of obedience. Jiang Li exhales quietly, her heart still racing. She steps forward, placing herself protectively between the children and Nakamura. "You have a choice," she whispers, her voice trembling but resolute. "Even here, in the heart of horror, you can decide what kind of person you will be." Nakamura glances at the children, at the white handkerchief, at the candlelight flickering over innocent faces. His jaw tightens, the tension of a lifetime of obedience colliding with the spark of human conscience. Slowly, he lowers the rifle entirely, stepping fully into the room without aggression. For a moment, silence dominates, broken only by the faint crackle of the candle and the distant sounds of destruction outside. Rabe watches from the courtyard, sensing the shift in the air. Volunteers pause in their tasks, families huddle closer, children clutching one another. The fragile calm inside the church is a sanctuary carved from chaos. Outside, Nanking continues to burn, the cries of the city mingling with the crackling of fires and distant gunfire. Inside, life persists, fragile yet undeniable. Every breath, every heartbeat, every whispered prayer is a quiet act of defiance against the relentless tide of violence. The night stretches on. Smoke drifts through the broken windows, curling over sleeping children, over Jiang Li, over Nakamura's hesitant figure. Outside, the streets remain rivers of fire and shadow. But inside the church, a fragile truth endures. Humanity, compassion, and conscience can survive even in the heart of darkness. The children huddle closer to Jiang Li, the white handkerchief folded carefully in the smallest hands. The candle flickers one final time before settling into a steady glow, casting its light over the weary but alive faces. In this small room, amid the ruins of a city consumed by horror, life clings stubbornly, unbroken, luminous against the darkness. As dawn breaks, pale and grey, the church remains untouched. The streets outside tell the story of death, destruction, and loss, But inside, a small group of children, their teacher, a conflicted soldier, and a determined man of conscience have survived. The city is still a city of ghosts, but in this fragile sanctuary, hope persists. For Jiang Li, for the children, for Rabe, and even for Nakamura, the night is over, but the memory of Nanking will linger forever, etched into their hearts as both a warning and a testament to human resilience in the face of unthinkable horror.